All right, so the last thing we want to talk about is local storage. So we talked about ways to kind of update items. Let's talk about local storage. So this is the idea of actually, what if we want to persist the data? There's ways that your browser can go about storing data. There's actually a few ways. There's local storage, there's session storage, and then something that we're probably familiar with on some level called cookies. Again, these are different ways to store data between instances of your page. So local storage persists data so long as your browser cache is alive. So if you refresh your browser caches and wipe it out, then you'll lose stuff from your local storage. Session storage is a little more limited. That's data that only persists so long as your browser is open. Once you kill that browser, session storage is cleared. However, local storage persists between different instances of your browser. And the last one is cookies. Cookies normally have an expiration date, so that's stored somewhere on your machine. And cookies will kind of just be data that web pages can extract values from. All these ways are just ways for you to store information that can be used later on when your page is revisited. We're going to be focusing on local storage, but again, session storage is the same concept, just different lifetime. Cookies are a little more advanced. I'm not going to talk about them today. Let's focus on local storage. And the good thing about local storage, it's very easy to use. So the syntax is basically you need to provide a value and a key. Very similar to how dictionaries work in Python or objects in JavaScript. They're a key value pair system. That's how local storage is kind of made up of. Then you're going to call local storage. Notice the naming here, local, lowercase, capital S, storage. This, again, is a predefined object that exists. You do not need to import it. You do not need to create local storage. It already exists, just like document exists, just like window exists in your JavaScript. That's something that your browser is providing you. So local storage has a method called setItem. For setItem, you simply need to pass it a key and the value that you want to store. So the key is going to be how you access it. The value is actually what you want to access, as in the data that you want to store. And then when you want to get that data back at some later point, you call getItem from local storage. All right, and then you should have access to that. Again, it's very simple. I know it seems like a whole new concept, but essentially you're just storing something somewhere that your browser has access to, and you can retrieve it using the key that you stored it with. It's just like how a dictionary works in Python. Okay, let's do a quick example of local storage. So let's actually continue our example here. We have Bill Gates. What if we want to, if I refresh my page, notice that everything clears. Like Bill Gates was removed from here. Bill Gates is no longer restored here. What if we want to remember the user name and actually welcome the user if they have something stored? Well, we can do that through local storage. So I'm going to add some code here. So when they click the button, my handle button submit name clicked, kind of a mouthful to say, but this is what actually responds to that button being clicked. So in here, I can access local storage. So let's actually change this up a little bit. Let's go back to an if statement, if username inputs, and it's not blank. So I'm going to check this. We want to do set the name equal to user input. All right, and then we'll alert. But then we also want to store it in local storage. So again, local storage is an object that exists. Notice that VS Code knows that exists. I could do setItem. Let's do user name and then the value that we want to store. All right, so name is a variable I create. It's a string value, and I'm going to store that with the key of user underscore name. All right, so let's actually see what happens. If I go Bill Gates, submit. Notice I get HTML input element. That is not what I want. What do I do here?
I think you're missing your brackets on 23.
Yep. Again, brackets are optional, but recommended. In this case, it's a single line, so brackets are not needed, but I forgot the dot value here. All right, so that is what I want. Let's try it one more time. Bill Gates. All right, so notice I get hello Bill Gates, as expected in my alert. I got the mirroring and that div, but now if I open up my browser developer panel, so that's Command Option I on a Mac for Chrome, you can actually go to application. There should be something called local storage in there. Notice, let me actually delete that. Try it again. Okay, notice that I have something entered in my local storage now. So again, just to review the steps, if you Command Option I, you should get your developer panel here. Go to your application tab. Within that, you should have a local storage item listed on the left side here. In there, you should be able to, for your web page, you should see what you've stored. So notice I have a key of user_name. That is the key I provided, and the value that's stored is Bill Gates, because that's what I stored in there. Important thing to mention for local storage, you can only store string values. You can't store an array. You're gonna have to convert it to a string. So you can't store like a dictionary or an array in here. It's going to have to be a string value. So it's gonna require you to convert objects from JavaScript into strings. And the way you do that will be using JSON. We'll see, we get an example of that, but I want to wrap this up shortly. So local storage set username. Now that I've stored this in my local storage, I can actually kill this browser. All right, I close that browser. Let's launch it again. So live server, please bring that back. All right, so I close my browser. I'm back to my web page in a new browser. Let's open up our developer panel. Notice that that key and value are still stored. So again, local storage exists between sessions. As in, you close your window, open up a new window, come back to the page. That is still stored in your browser. Okay, now that that's still stored, we can actually leverage that. So let's say when we load our page, let's actually try to get a name value out. So we'll say let's name equals, I'm going to use local storage and inspect local storage and ask, hey, do you have something stored under the username key? In fact, since I'm using this key twice, right, I'm using it here to extract and here to save. Best practice, you should convert this to a single variable, because if you rename one, you're going to have to rename the other. So I'm going to say user name key, and I'm going to use this. So again, this reduces the chance of a bug creeping in because I'm centralizing where I have that value, so I can use it here. I want to make that const even. All right, so username key is how I save and retrieve it. All right, so if we get a name back, let's say if name, let's just say hello to our user automatically. Alert. Actually, I'll just use our div. Where that div go? Output. I'm gonna show it in output instead. Let me modify some code, get rid of this. That wants this. Okay, so here, we're gonna get our output div. If output div, then output div.inner HTML is gonna be hello and name. Use backticks because we're string interpolating. So basically, what this is doing is it's going to investigate local storage. If it finds something that's non-empty here, so maybe make this more explicit, and name not equal empty. If it finds something that's not null and non-empty, it's going to proceed to show that automatically when we load our page. So if I do this one more time, let's keep this open. I'm going to refresh my page. Notice it says hello Bill Gates right out of the box. I never had to enter anything here. That's because my local storage knew about that. But if I trash this and now refresh my page, notice it has nothing to show because our logic didn't find anything, so it's not going to say anything. But if I wanted to enter in Bill Clinton, I can submit it, get an alert. Notice my local storage updated. So now if I refresh this, we get hello Bill Clinton automatically. Okay, so local storage is very powerful and very easy to use. Again, key thing is you store a key and a value pair. You use the key to extract the value when you need it, if you need it. The last example I'm going to go through is storing an array, because this gets slightly more complicated, but not too much more. Let's say I want to store an array in my user input. So let's say const sum data equals 1, 2, donuts, 4. All right, this is some data. Maybe I extracted, maybe I computed, who knows? It doesn't really matter. But I want to store this data in local storage. Let's store it in onload. So if I do local storage, let's add a key for this. So const some data key is some key. All right, so I'm going to set item, which stores it. And I'll use some key, some data key, and some data. All right, so I just want to store this in local storage. Let's see what happens if I try to store this. So again, this is going to happen on load. So let me refresh this. Add anything. All right, so it did add that. I guess I'm surprised it added that. What if this were a dictionary instead? We'll sort dictionaries. I'm actually questioning myself now. Refresh. All right, so now it stores an object. So that's not what you want, because when you get the object back, it's not going to be a dictionary. So I guess arrays behave a little differently. But if I did local storage.get item, some data key.
Unger, would it store the array as a string?
I think so. Yeah, my understanding it's always a string, but again, I'm questioning myself right now, so I'm gonna need to double check. But let's just go with let stored data is this. Let's actually print out or alert stored data. Right. So basically, we have a dictionary now with gummy bears and donuts. We want to store that and simply store it here, retrieve it, and show it to our user. So save that. Notice we get object. That's not what we want. So if we actually need to store this, this is where JSON comes into play. So JSON is just a format where you can create a string representation of JavaScript objects. That's a mouthful to say, but essentially you're just creating a string equivalent of something in JavaScript that you can easily write to and extract from. So to do this, I'm going to do JSON.stringify. All right, so that's going to convert it to a string. And then if I want to get it back, I'll do JSON.parse. All right, so this will actually make it a dictionary again. I'm actually not sure how it's going to render. So yeah, so it's still object. Bad example. What if I actually want to investigate this dictionary? Let's put a breakpoint. Let's run this and wrap this up. All right, so run breakpoint. Okay, store data. What is store data? It is that dictionary. Get item was able to get that, but it is a string. Notice it's wrapped in quotation marks. So it's not actually a dictionary. It's a string representation of a dictionary, right? So I can't do something like alert, stored data, change this breakfast, lunch, right? So if I want to show stored data breakfast, which should be gummy worms, it's not going to work. It's actually going to silently fail on me. So I refresh this. Notice store data is a string. It's going to step into this. It's not going to succeed with this. Undefined. That doesn't exist. Because I need to convert this back to a dictionary. So where'd my code go? Okay. Instead of doing this, I need to parse this. So I'll do JSON.parse. It's going to convert it back from a JSON format to an actual JavaScript dictionary. So now if I ran this, notice my breakpoint. Now I actually have a dictionary. It's not just a string. So if I called store data square brackets breakfast, it should print out gummy worms. Here we go. Or gummy bears, sorry. Forgot what I put there. All right, so just know you need to stringify and unstringify items. So let's see what happens with an array. That was my initial example. Just do gummy bears and donuts. All right, and I just want to show the first index. All right, so I convert it back to an array. The question is, will it actually store that as an array? And I don't think it does. So refresh. All right, stored data. Again, it's a string. So it does not actually store the array. It actually automatically converts to a string. So you do need to parse it back out, JSON.parse. And this should work. If I refresh. Let it load. Debugger takes a little while. Oh, sorry, that right. Stored data, it's an array, great. Gammaber bears, right? I have a typo there, but typos happen. Gammaber bears. All right, so again, local storage, very simple, very powerful, good way to store data in between. Again, you can use cookies, which are a little more advanced. Session storage, you can use that if you only want to persist between your window being open and closed, but you will need to use local storage for your challenges today. So let me stop the recording there.